when the tree falls.
Really? Yeah. We got two big rain barrels full. Whenever we have to water the garden. We don't have to do it anytime soon. Roundup. You gotta use some Roundup on the weed.
I'd like to call the May 19th, 2025 Planning Commission to order. If you would, please stand for a moment of silence and pledge of allegiance. Thank you. Mr. Ryder, would you please do the roll call?
Ms. Townsend?
Here.
Ms. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Moyer?
Here.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Here.
Ms. Thomas?
Here.
Mr. La Rochelle?
I'm here.
Dr. Schmidt?
Here.
Ms. Rose?
Here.
Reverend Hathaway?
Here.
Mr. Bennett?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Here, and we have a quorum. Next, approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes for April 21st meeting?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
one correction. I think it's just a letter that's been added in incorrectly on page 5 of the minutes. First paragraph, second to last line, near the end of that line, question that may result in a different data, not M-A-T-Y, Matty. That's the only correction I find.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Page 3, the third paragraph down. Mr. Bennett, at the opening of the paragraph, is spelled correctly, but later in the paragraph, it's missing a T on the end.
Okay.
I'm used to that. I'm used to that.
Thank you, Ms. Larshell.
That's one of your areas.
I also have a correction on page 3 as well. The fifth paragraph, first line, correction for Mr. Moran's name. Should say Gary. Any other corrections?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move that we adopt the meeting minutes as altered or changed for April 21st, 2025 of the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Do we have a motion to approve the April 21st minutes with the corrections provided? Mr. Ryder?
Mr. LaRochelle,
Aye.
Mr. Moyer,
Aye.
Ms. Rose,
Aye.
Dr. Schmidt,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
I'll abstain due to being absent last month.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Abstain from being absent.
Ms. Townsend. Oh, did I say Ms. Townsend? Miss. Sorry. So Ms. Johnson then. Okay. Mr. Reverend Hathaway,
Aye.
Ms. Thomas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Now on to the citizen comment period. Do we have anybody signed up? No one signed up for the citizen comment period. We'll close that. Do we have any presentations? No. No presentations? Unfinished business. I think it may fall under unfinished business. I do have, just when I ask staff if they have any reviewed any comments from the commissioners or the fact checking of the numbers as we last discussed as a condition in passing, forwarding that to the board.
Test. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Patrick Silva, Principal Planner with the county's Planning Division. I can confirm that we did receive some edits from members of the commission here, as well as some final bits of internal feedback, as well as staff in concurrence with the folks from EPR did go through and double-checked all of the numbers in the comp plan pursuant to what was discussed at last month's hearing. Those adjustments have now been made. We are awaiting a final version to be sent to us, but the comp plan has been docketed for consideration at the June regular business meeting of the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Mr. Silver.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
could you send us an email when you get the final edited version so we have a chance to look at it and make sure the corrections were incorporated? Thank you.
Any other unfinished business you can think of? If not, continue to new business. Mr. Silva?
All righty. So I think we just have one item under new business tonight. Again, good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Again, my name is Patrick Silver, Principal Planner with the county's Planning Division. Giving a little preface. We'll get the presentation up here. A little preface to the one public hearing item you will be considering this evening that you will be hearing from in a moment here from Ms. Lefflet, Zoning Administrator, regarding proposed updates to the County Code pertaining specifically to accessory structures in conjunction with both residential and agricultural uses. So the proposed amendments that you'll be considering this evening have incorporated feedback received from both planning commissioners at the discussion item, from the discussion item back in February, as well as from last month's Planning Commission public hearing at which this item was deferred. So we have taken the feedback that was received by staff from both members of the Commission as well as members of the AFD Advisory Committee over the last few months, and staff does feel confident that the updated proposed amendments that you'll be considering this evening will provide a solid framework for the future of the county. So again, as a quick preface, I did want to briefly highlight that staff has done their best to consider the comprehensive impact of the proposed changes before you this evening. So we have seen and heard from many county residents regarding the need for a larger accessory structure allowance in general, while also recognizing the importance of allowing for exemptions to accessory structure regulations in relation to qualifying farming operations. However, we also recognize that more structures and more impervious surfaces also do have impacts, from things like changing the perception of density and bulk at a given site to things like affecting stormwater runoff characteristics as well. And with those points in mind, staff does maintain that there needs to exist some limit to the maximum allowable accessory structure square footage in order to both protect adjacent property owners as well as downstream waterways. Just a little bit more context for what is before you tonight. So Title 15.2 of the Code of Virginia gives counties in the Commonwealth the authority to enact zoning ordinances with the general purposes of promoting health, safety, and general welfare of the public. And more specifically, it grants counties the ability to regulate the use of land and structures, along with the size, area, and location of those structures as a means to do so. And indeed, pursuant to our county's own comprehensive plan, our own zoning ordinance should give specific consideration to the creation of an attractive and harmonious community while preserving agricultural and forestal lands and protecting the natural environment. So with all of those points considered, this is exactly what staff kept in mind in bringing forward the updated proposal to you for this evening. Staff is kindly requesting that the Planning Commission take action on this docket item this evening, as there are a number of residents who are sort of waiting in the weeds, as it were, on the outcome of these amendments, so they may move forward with their various projects at their A1 zone properties. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Lefflet to provide a more detailed presentation as to the updates to the proposed amendments before you this evening.
And this is still under new business. We're not moving to the public hearing yet? Oh, so for the formality of that. Okay. So for our public hearing, open public hearing for the zoning text amendments regarding accessory structures and Board of Zoning Appeals, I'm going to turn this over to the public hearing chair, Ms. Rose.
Thank you. Tonight we have one public hearing for consideration. It has been, it was deferred from the last meeting and has been properly, duly re-noticed for tonight's consideration. The public hearing will consist of a review by staff of the proposed amendments. We will then hear from any comments from the commissioners, and then we will move into the public consideration, public comment phase. With anyone that wishes to speak, they'll be given three minutes. You'll come up to the podium, state your name and your address for the record, and limit your comments to the address of the commission. So with that, we'll turn it back over to staff for the majority of the presentation.
Good evening. My name is Angela Lefflet, Zoning Administrator for New Kent County. And tonight I have shortened the presentation just because the board has seen this already in April, as well as a presentation that was presented in February. So for the efforts of time, I'll just be highlighting the changes that we have made since April, as well as hitting on just a couple more of those amendments just as a refresher. So today I'm bringing forward two zoning ordinance amendments. One is to the accessory buildings, chapter 98-10 of the zoning ordinance, and then the Board of Zoning Appeals ordinance amendment as well. So the proposed changes is to amend the definition of accessory buildings and add a definition for accessory dwelling units, increase the allowed limit for accessory buildings for lot zone residential and A1, and then just to clarify some longstanding interpretations that are now would be put into the ordinance, so it's a lot clearer for our residents as well as any contractors or those looking into New Kent County Code. There's no question on what would qualify as an accessory building or structure. So the proposed amendment, nothing changed here on the definition for accessory building. We added the word or structure, and then we added those types of buildings or structures which are included but not limited to the list that is here. And then we added the accessory dwelling unit as its own separate definition. So nothing changed there from last month to this month. So the proposed amendment for Chapter 98, Article 1, Section 9810, more specifically subsection C3, we are changing a little bit of the wording, adding some wording in. So we're now adding accessory buildings as defined in the ordinance, customarily associated with residential living. And I just want to pause here. That's pretty important. These are customary to residential living. So once I get into the A1 portion of this ordinance change, those that are commercial businesses and uses on A1's property, this would not apply here. It's for residential uses. For residential living, the cumulative total of all detached accessory structures may not exceed 60% of the total floor area for the primary structure. So this is the portion that's changing for our residentially zoned districts. So we're thinking R1, R2, RO, ROA, those are zoned properties. We are adding a little bit more. We've noticed here recently that there have been some heavy constraints on smaller homes where 50% was not enough to allow for a detached two-car garage and just a basic shed. Looking at a couple of properties that had these constraints, adding just 10% more allows a two-car detached garage and a shed or any kind of lean-to on the property. So then going into the A1 portion, previously, we've kept the let me go back. In the agricultural A1 district, such structures may total up to 5% of the lot area beyond the front setback line, but may not exceed a cumulative total of 10,000 square feet, whichever is less. So we've kept that. We've had feedback that that's a pretty decent number. 10,000 square feet, it's about a quarter of an acre of just roof on a property. So that didn't change here. However, previously we had another line that had stated for lots of 20 acres or less, we're limited to 8 structures. We've taken that out. So with us taking that out, we added in an exemption for farmers and farming operations that we'll see on the next slide. The reason we had previously had that in was to try and create some kind of separation between farming operations and residential operations. Hearing the feedback that the board provided, as well as our AFD members and residents, we have now taken that out with the farmer exemption. So the total square footage includes, but is not limited to, roof structures such as attached or detached gazebos, porches, lean-tos on accessory structures. That was a portion that wasn't really clear in our ordinance prior. It was a prior interpretation by previous zoning administrators. So now we're a little bit more clear with those who are looking at doing projects that add a covered roof that extend beyond the walls. So here we are at the farming exemption. So buildings or structures accessory to a farm use as defined in the Code of Virginia, Section 3697, or as amended, are hereby exempt from the provisions listed above in Section 9810C3. So those structures would not have that square footage limit. A farm is defined in the Code of Virginia 3.2-6400 as amended as one or more areas of land used for the production, cultivation, growing, harvesting, or processing of agricultural products. Such activities can be supported or evidenced through active business licenses, farming registrations, AFD designation, and other similar documentation that staff finds sufficiently confirms the farm use is being operated. So maybe the cooperative extension has some documentation that they can help us with to confirm the farm operations so that we can apply these exemptions, still keep the integrity of our farming operators while allowing our residential uses. So someone that doesn't farm for profit on their property would still be able to have that increased structure, and we're going to exempt those structure size limits for our farming operations. So just to recap on these changes, we're increasing the allowed limit for accessory buildings for lot zone residential as well as our A1 zone properties. We're changing that from 3,000 square feet up to 5% of the lot area past the front setback line, or 10,000 square feet, whichever is less. We've added an exemption for our farming uses and farming structures, and then we're codifying longstanding zoning interpretation so that it's clear for our general public when they look at our ordinance. So moving on to the Board of Zoning Appeals, this one will keep a little bit shorter. The current ordinance doesn't align with the Code of Virginia. There's some discrepancies between local and state law. So now we're doing a lot of referencing in the Board of Zoning Appeals section to the state law, state code, so that we can keep in line and not have to keep coming back every year or so when those changes are made at the state level. We're amending the current variance definition to align with the Code of Virginia. We're also removing special exception process. These are already heard through our Board of Supervisors. So going through the Board of Zoning Appeals for a use exception doesn't align real well, so we're just going to leave that with the Board of Supervisors, and they'll come to Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. And then we are amending the administrative modification process. So right now it's very vague. The only three qualifying processes for an administrative modification align with a variance. So trying to figure out what the difference is between what we would allow for an administrative modification that I would approve internally versus what needs to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals is very gray. This one is going to give a little bit more parameters so that when our residents or contractors are looking at our ordinance, it's pretty clear for them. So the only main portion that I'll touch on here is the portion where it talks about the administrative modification. And you can see the first line, pursuant to Code of Virginia, and we state that Code 15.2. That's going to reference anybody back to the Code of Virginia to make sure that we're clear. So we're adding that the encroachment does not exceed 1 1/2 linear feet. This is pretty standard and pretty consistent with other localities across the board when researching how do they handle and word their Board of Zoning Appeals chapter. So finding that it's just a very minimum setback that's needed reduction, and it doesn't hit too much into the building code separation that's required. We're keeping such hardships are not shared generally by other parties of the same zoning district. Forcing compliance with the minimum setback and yard requirements would cause an undue hardship upon the owner. And then non-compliance was done in good faith. It wasn't created by the property owner. It's not detrimental to the use and enjoyment of properties in the vicinity. The zoning district does not change by granting the variance, and it will not create an unsafe condition with respect to both properties and public streets. So with that, staff is available if you have any questions for the two zoning ordinance amendments for accessory buildings and Board of Zoning Appeals. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions or comments for staff?
I have a question.
Yes.
let me just make sure my mic is on. For anyone that's living in smaller homes or mobile homes, if something happens to the shed that they currently have, they can replace it. It's grandfathered in, but if something happens to them at any point, they will be able to replace it to what's there, right?
Yes, so if we're talking about, heaven forbid, a hurricane or a tornado or a fire comes through, and it's legal non-conforming, we do have a chapter for legal non-conforming structures and uses. If they're voluntarily taking down a structure because they don't want it anymore, they don't like it, then they would have to comply with today's zoning ordinance requirements. But anything that is considered more so like an act of God that they just didn't purposely do themselves, yes, they could replace it if need be.
Okay.
I have a question. Did we ever discuss anything in regards to sheds in front of the main dwellings, or was that part of this conversation last month?
So that didn't change. So if you're referring to any structures in front of a home on an R-zone property, that's remained the same. The A1 zoning district does not have that prohibition to where they can't put a structure in the front. So we're looking at, once you hit the 75 for A1, the 75-foot front setback, anything past that, you could, as long as you're meeting setbacks, you could have a structure there. But the R-zone property still cannot have accessory structures in the front yard.
I have a question. For the accessory buildings, they're limited to one mailbox. Is that correct?
I'm not sure on the mailbox.
If someone adds an accessory building onto their property, say for a senior adults, could they have a separate mailbox?
That is a good question. I would have to look into that. I'm not familiar with it, but I'm happy to look into it to have that answer available.
And I guess, am I assuming, but there would be one address, correct? Because it's on a single parcel, if my understanding is correct. So if you add a second mailbox, I don't know if the post office will allow two mailboxes with the same address with different names on them.
Or if they're talking about maybe a different address for the different structure.
Then they would have to divide the property. Yeah, they'd have to go through all that.
So you can have a detached accessory dwelling unit.
Right.
Regarding the mailbox situation, I would have to look further into that, and I can get you an answer there this week.
I am familiar with the particular situation that someone I know, they do have the same address, but they have a separate mailbox, and the mailbox is coded A. One is A, one is A1.
Mm-hmm. And that might be through the post office, but I'm happy to check into that so we're prepared.
Madam Chairman, I have a question on the
Yes.
Section 14 talks about the square footage. In no case in excess of 25% of total square, this is under the accessory single-family residential units, and must in no case exceed, and in no case contain in excess of 25% of total square footage of a single-family home to which is accessory, or 450 square foot, whichever is greater. So 2,000 square foot home, you get 25% of that, or 450 square feet. Am I reading that correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's I'm putting mother-in-law in a 500 square foot accessory single-family residential. That seems kind of small for that purpose. I know we don't want to have two primary residences, but 500 square feet seems pretty small.
And that would be the option where, so that none of that changed in the ordinance except just the word must in Board of Zoning Appeals. So that would be where an applicant could go for a variance through our Board of Zoning Appeals, and it would be up to that board to approve or deny that request.
Is it beyond our scope tonight to modify that if we wanted to? It's not a proposed change that you're presenting. Does that have to go through the process?
I'm not quite sure.
So the Planning Commission certainly would have the purview to recommend any additional changes. Admittedly, staff, as part of this process, has not looked specifically at the impacts that an increase in the allowance for square footage associated with the actual accessory dwelling unit in an accessory building. So we might not have as good a sense of what sort of impacts or implications that might have, as opposed to some of the research that we have done for just square footage allowances for accessory buildings in general. But certainly the commission would have the purview to suggest those changes if they wanted to.
And just to make note, we do have we're still working on moving forward with the overall zoning ordinance amendment rewrite that's happening. So that process should take about 1.5 to 2 years. Staff would be happy to look into that if that's the request, so we can check on that the impact, and we have time to do that to make a more educated and well thought out change rather than doing something in a couple of months.
And then my last question is, there's several terms in here: pool house, boat house, guest house. What's the distinction between a guest house and a single family residential unit?
So the guest house would be more, they're almost kind of the one and the same. That is where between the guest house and the accessory dwelling unit, staff is considering at our rewrite just creating that as one rather than having the two separate. Guest house are only permitted in agricultural zones, whereas a detached accessory dwelling unit can be in any of the R or agricultural zones. But I will say that we're going to try and combine that as one for less confusion.
All right, thank you. And for boat house, or for pool house and a boat house, what does that mean?
So a pool house is typically, if you think of where you've got a kitchenette, a bathroom, an area to kind of go just hang out when you're done with the pool, they're usually closer to a pool. And a boat house is going to be more closer to the shoreline, either housing a boat. Sometimes they're up, you've got little sections connected to the deck where it's on land that we would consider. So those are just the two distinctions. Usually the pool house is fully roofed and walled, and the boat house just has a roof on it.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, just follow up. On the 450 square feet, do we have to wait 2.5 years to decide that? Because looking at, and I'm just going to use myself as an example. I'm wrestling with, okay, do I downsize now and move to the Groves? Or do I stay where I am and add on? If I have to have 450 feet, I know I'm moving to the Groves. That's just really too small. If I've lived in a 2,500 square foot house and you're asking me to go to 450, I got too much junk.
So that would be if you're doing the detached accessory dwelling. If Planning Commission would like for us to look into that beforehand, you're happy to let us know. We can start working on that. It would just take a little bit longer than moving forward with the accessory structures that we have done the work on since December.
I don't have a problem with going ahead with this, but I would like staff to look at that so that we can come back as a separate item.
Sure.
And I guess to clarify to your point, so a 3,000 square foot house, the maximum allowable for a accessory dwelling unit would be 750 square feet.
Yes.
Because it's 450 or greater. So,
yes.
So basically the larger the house, the larger the accessory dwelling unit you could have.
Correct.
Okay. Madam Chair, another comment. I do appreciate the changes to the farm structures as far as the definition. I think the state definition's a good way to go. That's something obviously it's used as for other regulations to refer to and related to farm structures in other cases. So I appreciate that.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Thinking back to last month, there was a cost in there for people. I believe it was $750. Does that still stand?
So the cost that you might be referring to was the administrative modification that at the time we had the farming modification under, and that was $450. So that wouldn't apply anymore because it's not under the Board of Zoning Appeals chapter. Our Board of Zoning Appeals variances are $750, correct? But if the farming exemption is used, there's no fee to that.
Okay. All
Any other comments or questions?
I have a comment. The 450 square feet, in my opinion, that's a lot. When I first got started in my practice in West Point, I only had 300 square feet in my office. And I did very well for 3 years in 300 square feet. I mean, somebody could live in 300 square feet very easily. I mean, I just don't think that that's a big deal. I mean, unless they want to have 4 or 5 bedrooms. I mean, I had 2 treatment rooms, an office, 3 chairs in my waiting room, and it worked out very well. So I think that's ample for a 1-bedroom for a mother-in-law.
Thank you, Dr. Schmidt. Anything else? If not, is anyone signed up to from the public to comment? Or seeing none, I am going to close the public hearing and turn it back over to the chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. Any further discussion from the commissioners? If not, I'll certainly entertain a motion. That's yeah, just a message to staff. We don't have the template that we normally do to read from.
For the motion.
Thank you, Reverend Hathaway. So we have a motion to approve PC 0725. It's approval of amendments to Chapter 98 zoning of the New Kent County Code, amending the accessory building definition and regulations, as well as aligning the Board of Zoning Appeals ordinance with the Code of Virginia. Mr. Ryder, could you please poll the commissioners?
Mr. La Rochelle?
Aye.
Mr. Moyer?
Abstain.
Ms. Rose?
Aye.
Dr. Schmidt?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson? Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Ms. Townsend?
Aye.
Reverend Hathaway?
Aye.
Ms. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, commissioners. And moving on to the chairman report. Just to let the commissioners know, I will be out of state from June 14th to the 16th, so I will miss our agenda meeting with staff. I believe so. Usually June 4th, I believe, is that what's going to be. I'll be flying to. No, we have an agenda meeting prior to. So Mr. Bennett and I, chair and vice chair, attend. So I'm assuming Mr. Bennett, you'll be available. Thank you. Also, I will be out of town during the when the board is meeting to address the comp plan update. Certainly, I've had a certain amount of investment in that project, being on both the committee and then planning commission during for that. And Mr. Bennett may or may not be available, and Ms. Rose may or may not be available. If one are available to at least attend in case the board might have questions from a planning commissioner perspective, or the both of you also served on the update committee as well. So appreciate that. And now on to Plan RVA report. Reverend Hathaway?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Plan RVA met on Thursday the 15th, and primarily we looked at Title VI plan to make sure that limited English proficiency is addressed in all of our plans. And it was a very long meeting to go through that process, but I think we came up with a good end product. And for the, Mr. Chairman, Housing Advisory. Would you like me to give that name?
Yes, you may.
Okay. All right, the Housing Advisory Committee met, and I think we're coming down to the home stretch in terms of what we want to present to the Board of Supervisors. We had several presentations at our May meeting, and primarily AutoZone came, and they talked about the need right now. Primarily what they're looking at is of the employees that they've hired thus far, only 20 of them live in New Kent. And she stressed the fact that it's because they cannot find affordable housing in New Kent. And people are driving as far as an hour and a half away to get here. And so AutoZone traditionally has a very high turnover because of that. And so I think that's something we already knew, and it's not something that we can fix overnight.
And I guess as a follow-up to your comment, sir, only 20. To put it in perspective, how many employees does AutoZone have?
They're going to have 325 altogether. They're about halfway there now.
Thank you.
Sure.
Reverend Hathaway, if I may add, they have 325, as Reverend Hathaway said. They would like to add another 100 in the next 2 months. Another 100 employees. But with their staff traveling 45 minutes to 90 minutes from Henrico and northern Chesterfield, that's the only source of employees they're finding.
So, Mr. Chairman, a question I have is obviously the trend has been ongoing for some time about the cost of housing in New Kent, and they chose to build here. Is it a wage issue? Is it a housing issue? Is it both?
She explained that the average wage is about $45,000 a year, but with overtime, they can make $70,000 to $75,000 a year. The problem, as she explained it, is when you're getting employees in and trying to buy their first home or trying to buy a home here, being able to save that kind of money, they just don't have it. We looked at some opportunities, had one presenter to come and talk about 200 rental apartments. But even at that, if it were approved today, you're still looking at 2 years before that's available. And there's a tremendous economic impact. If you crush the numbers, if we have 1,000 jobs in New Kent and people are working here but cannot live here, the economic impact is a little over $7 million a year. And that's quite a bit that we're losing.
Thank you, Randy.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
One of the things with AutoZone I've noticed, I get the Williamsburg Daily, 7 o'clock in the morning, it comes up. Daily now there is a "we're hiring" ad from AutoZone, which I did not see before, which I think that's a very good area to tap into, the James City County, York County. That's not that bad a ride on a normal day, you know. And also when all these townhouses get done in Henrico over by Technology Boulevard, that'll be another group of employees they'll be able to get. We're not going to be able to take care of them here, but there are some stuff coming online that we'll be able to take care of them.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any other discussion? All right, I'm going to move on to commissioner reports. Mr. LaRochelle?
No, sir.
Ms. Thomas? No. Ms. Johnson? Mr. Dombrowski?
Nothing at this time.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes. I don't know if y'all read Facebook, but you notice that there's been some really bad accidents that have been happening on 249, especially at Henpat and 249. And then we've had some traffic issues where the interstate's been backed up, and it has been literally bumper to bumper on 249. So I think the stoplight has worked well so far with the construction. People seem to sort of have adapted to it, but I'm hoping soon that we sort of get a date somewhere out there, and I'm sure Mr. Moore is going to be able to inform me on some updates. But we are really at a tipping point right at the moment of prices with the way the traffic is dealing in that particular area. And luckily, we have not had any casualties, I believe. So, but, you know, that can happen very easily. So I do hope that we can keep an update on the road progress.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend. Reverend Hathaway? Dr. Schmidt?
Nope.
Mr. Bennett?
Just one thing, and most of the commissioners will acknowledge this. It seemed like we've been a little bit arduous on specifically this code regarding accessory use, accessory structures and everything. And it should be hard to develop the code or the ordinances. They're developed to be understood by the citizens who are there being applied to. They're written to be rigid, yet without being burdensome. They're to be composed to span the course of time, and they're also written to be enforceable. Without those components, they become unusable. So it's worthwhile us to be considerable, use the time wisely when we consider these ordinances or rewrites. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Ms. Rose?
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Moyer?
I guess I need to answer Ms. Townsend. So we are for the roundabout at Dispatch and New Kent Highway. We are beyond the planning. A design has been accepted. Now we have to get the easements from the property owners, which you would not be one, Ms. Townsend. And once that's done, then we pretty much have the funds from the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. Our portion of that, we would have our half of the revenue sharing. So funding it's not going to be a problem. So we got to get the approval from the landowners, get the RFPs out there through VDOT, and we'll be a go in that. And I'll tell you, as soon as that's done, not done, but as soon as we get people constructing it, yeah, we'll be going back to VDOT for HENPEC. I don't know if we need to just make HENPEC a perpendicular intersection versus whatever you want to call it is right now, or if we need a circle there also. But they'll do their due diligence and their study that VDOT. The 64, I actually had the ability to go all the way through both ways, and it is interesting. They've done a lot of work in that small James City part and James City County and a little bit of our part, but they are stopped till November because of the bats. Okay, they'll be removing trees that they've taken down, but you will not see any more trees come down in that area. The rest of the area, almost all the trees that were going to be removed are removed. So that's not a holdup. And I believe that, there are certain areas it looks like they could open it, and that just makes it a little easier for traffic to flow. It gives some space between those Jersey barriers sometimes that we can go one way or the other. Please be cognizant of the speed and it is a fluid situation for that speed limit. I talked to the sheriff today, and he was able to invite 3 people to the policeman's ball, or if you want to say. They weren't doing what they thought was too fast. They were doing 75, but it's listed as 60 at that time. Okay, so I think that's. When you're in bumper-to-bumper traffic, that's too fast anyway. But anyway, and there was another one, 83, which is, unconscionable, with that much work area. So in the next couple months, we hope the sheriff will be getting a photograph monitor that will, without any discussion, will take your picture and send you a speeding ticket. And that'll be set at a relatively liberal amount of speed, but it will be it'll be as out here in the front with the school. It'll be the $100, $85 towards the county, to the sheriff's department for any type of speed enforcement, and then $15 to the vendor. It will not go on your driving record, but I'm sure it'll be a pain for something, because it will be, you will need a high-speed camera, I think, because a lot of people go through there too quick. But please, try not to use 64 as a residence. You know, it's 60 and 249 are our roads, and I try to stay on those as much as possible nowadays. Hopefully it's better.
Thank you, Mr. Moria. Oh, and I'm going to circle back. I forgot to mention earlier, Mr. Silva, having conversations with several of the commissioners. Previously, we would get all paper copies or the agenda and meeting packets. I know we get it electronically now. There's several of us who prefer the physical or the paper versions. Would it be too much of an imposition to at least survey the commissioners on who would want the paper copies delivered prior to the meetings?
Not in the slightest. I'd be happy to send out an email tomorrow just polling folks on who might prefer the hard copy version, and at the same time that I send out the digital version and the sort of log of ongoing projects in review, I'd be happy to mail out hard copies to anyone who might want one or prefer that.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Ms. Silva, could you be a little more, less encryptive about how you, the projects and the site? Okay, I don't know what all those numbers mean, but if you put in the address and that, then they'll understand where it is. And that, we're just looking at a piece of paper if we don't know where it is.
Sure. So either a project name or address would be preferable.
Yeah, please.
Mr. Chairman, I have a suggestion for that. If we could just hyperlink in the GPIN pins, because that really helps if you can pull that and just be able to click on it. I mean, I often cross-reference over into the GIS and then also go to the development software. But even if they're in the development software, because then from there we can see the site plans, we can see all of the family subdivisions. I don't mind doing it either way, but if it would just be in there, it'd make our job a little bit easier to see where those locations are.
It'd be a very easy fix. I'd be happy to hyperlink all those.
Just hyperlink it. I think that, once you open the document, we just click on it, you would be right into that, be right into the development portal, and then all the information's there. And we can see all the site plans. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dabrowski.
Mr. Chairman, can I?
Yes, ma'am.
Bring up an issue? I know I talked to y'all once before about the buffers and the setbacks. Okay, from doing some of my homework, one particular development that I've been looking at only has a 15-foot setback, which would be 15 feet from the state road. I think we need to go back and look at that for these new developments that are coming in, and next month if you're not understanding what the picture looks like, maybe I can take a photo of it and show you exactly the issues that we're having. But when subdivisions come in, they need to set in somewhat, because I think the main purpose when we were working on this one particular area was to preserve the rural integrity of the county. So in other words, you're taking your subdivisions and sort of nestling them into the development, but not taking them all the way to the edge. So I would like to look at that, but then also I'd like to look at our buffers, because there would be no buffer at all. As I say, I can go down the road and look in this person's house sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner, and that's how close it is from the state road. So we do need to go back and revise that, as that there would be a setback and what the setback would look like from the next property, which the next property is the state road. So the setback needs to be further in.
Would a cure potentially be to have a true subdivision buffer from the adjoining road? Because it sounds like the only setbacks applied are the ones for the individual lots. at the beginning of the subdivision. Is that what you're saying?
Well, years ago, when this development had come in, the conversation was is that there would be a 100-foot setback. Okay. At some point in time during change of hands, new people coming in or whatever, the setbacks got changed again. But I would strongly suggest after our meeting, I could be more than happy to give you a description of where to locate. But I really think people need to see what this looks like and to understand that we were trying to preserve New Kent. Even though New Kent's growing leaps and bounds, and we can't stop all these subdivisions, but we can sort of work with Mother Nature. And in this particular case, you're not working with Mother Nature. You need to sort of say, one, if you're going to have a buffer behind the property line, then the buffer needs to be a dense buffer, and it needs to be something that's going to stay year-round, not anything that's going to be deciduous or drop their foliage. And then work on the actual 15-foot. We need to change that.
And I guess to clarify, is this an enforcement issue, or is it the buffer that you're describing? Is that are they meeting, or had they at one time met the ordinance?
That's what's in the ordinance as of right now. When I checked, it was 15.
So for 15 for a front, side, or back? Okay.
But that buffer could just be grass.
Yeah, the buffer is 50. Okay, for a subdivision, the buffer is 50. Okay. Well,
we need to.
Our zoning people that are here present now do not approve that.
What? Yes.
That is our problem, and we have seen that problem a lot in the last several weeks.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
No, I understand. 50 is, 15. Don't even talk 15. It's supposed to be 50. Okay. So, that's.
When we first started, I know that we were negotiating 100. Okay. And at some point in time, when it leaves here, then it gets negotiated up the ladder. Okay. So they changed maybe, and we're just not aware of those changes. But yes, we've got to start looking at that and be more diligent about how these subdivisions come in and how they're going to preserve the space.
So would they be grandfathered if they're not meeting the 50? Would they be grandfathered?
Look at her face.
Well, as far as I understood,
it's our mistake. It's going to be our mistake. If we didn't enforce the site plan for when it was built, that's our mistake. Okay, as things were going through like that. If somebody came in and said, this is what my site plan is, and then they did something different, now that's an enforcement situation. If they put their site plan in, it's wrong to our ordinance, and we accept it, that's our problem. Okay, so that's what I think has happened with that one. So I don't mean to throw anybody under the bus, but
Mr.
But just along in future sites, though, we need to be a little more diligent and make sure that we understand what the setback looks like. Because you can tell me that 75 foot, but if I'm from the road looking from it, what does 75 foot look like? 75, 50 foot, you might not be able to tell the difference. So we really need to get a visual of what it's going to look like. And that's what I'm hoping we'll kind of address. And I think we need to sort of address this really quickly to make sure that we don't have any errors come up in a future new subdivisions coming in.
Mr. Chairman, I have a suggestion for that, and this is me speaking a little bit off the cuff. If we're adjusting the county ordinance and the county code for where we are right now with the auxiliary structures, can we touch this and adjust the code on our buffer zones? I think if we put the right verbiage in and saying this is what we need to have, and this is the distance that we need, and these are the types of trees and foliage that we need, then there's no question to the developers of what needs to be there. and what we need. And then if there needs to be a variance to that, then it will come to us, and we can say, okay, this site is prepped for, now look at 60. And maybe on 60, when we have a mixed-use property, we don't need the 75, 50-foot buffer with, evergreen trees and things like that, because we're going to have a mixed use. We're going to have residential. We're going to have businesses. If we can look at this change the code, and then there's no question. Then the developer has to fall within those lines for what we say we want to do. And it's obviously up to the board to say yes or no on that. But I think if we can come with that information, that's something that they'd like to see.
Mr. Chairman, that's why I've been a proponent of us seeing stuff visually instead of words. A site plan for consideration, we see a site plan, or a special use permit or conditional use permit. We see a plan before us that can identify those buffers or shielding effects. And they somewhat get to be enforceable once you see it on a piece of paper versus words where somebody has to interpret the words. The second thing is, from my years of experience, there's things called aggressive occupation, where people think that that vacant land behind them is theirs. And they just move their stuff back beyond their property line and setback line and says, that's mine too. So yeah, it's enforcement, but I think us visualizing it first gives us a real good interpretation of what that buffer, how stout it is, how thick it is, density.
Well, and thinking out loud too, I'm curious if it would be worthwhile if staff could give us some type of presentation on, because the 15-foot buffer may be allowed in that scenario, but it's not the same in across all the zoning districts. So what is an acceptable buffer at one place may not be at another, all depending on the zoning, because it's not one-stop shopping at all. And I know that's something we do want to certainly address when we do the rewrite. So I think maybe the first step, maybe if we could have some small presentation on again, setbacks and what's required of a setback in general. And then I do, I fully hope and think that staff certainly responds to, if someone is not being compliant with the conditions that's imposed by the zoning ordinance, and that, take appropriate action. Certainly we have a new zoning administrator, and I know from my perspective, also serving on the BZA, that where we didn't meet for 10 years, we've met several times now. So with, if that's amenable to the group and the staff, time allowing on their part, to give us a primer on setbacks and buffering and what's acceptable or appropriate, and so we can recognize it.
I shared with Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have some surgery, so I probably will not be here for our June meeting.
And we certainly wish you well, and hopefully see you back as soon as we can. Any other discussion at this point? If not, our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 16th at 6:30, and look forward to seeing everyone, and except for Mr. Reverend Hathaway, even though you'll be with us in spirit. And with that, do I have a motion for adjournment? All right. We are adjourned at 7:30. Thank you.
You guessed it to the minute.